Hello, my name is Robin Lake. I'm a clinician at the Family Service Center, and I'm happy to be with you here today. You've met Dr. Renee Dominguez, our executive director, and she asked me to join her in this wonderful partnership with the Village of Northbrook to deliver the Coping During COVID series. Today, I'm going to briefly review the things you've already learned with Dr. Dominguez, and I'm going to extend the learning to focus on self talk and the ways to use what we know and what we've learned to apply to things that we're doing and tune into our own kindness. So, grab your notebook or whatever helps you keep track of your learning during this process, and let's start off by just very briefly reviewing some of the concepts from the last few weeks. The first week, you learned about the cognitive triangle. Thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are connected and influence each other, and we can consciously choose to change one point of the triangle, which results in changes in the others. The next week, you learn more about the cognitive point of that triangle and some common thinking errors that we all find ourselves doing at times, and ways to push back on those errors. Then Dr. Dominguez focused on worry and ways to catch yourself worrying and choose a strategy to manage the worry and anxiety that are so prevalent right now. Last week, Dr. Dominguez focused on boundaries and how we can thoughtfully use boundaries to take care of ourselves and protect ourselves from becoming really depleted. Today, our focus is how we speak to ourselves. The nagging or helpful voices in our head as we go through the day. Since we speak to ourselves silently in our minds more than we speak to anyone, and since we are always with ourselves, it would be wonderful to use our voice to be more effective, more intentional, more awesome as we do whatever we're doing, our work and our relationships, our life. The running commentary in our heads can sound like a critic or a nag, and that's the voice that is often most familiar and the one who shows up uninvited and just stays like an unwelcome party guest. The journalist can be more neutral, just the facts, ma'am, who can be a huge help when we're trying to change that cognitive part of the cognitive triangle. Like when you see a friend across a parking lot and they just keep moving, and you might think, my friend is mad at me. But the journalist reminds you that your friend is actually just moving fast and never saw you across the parking lot. And then our friend is a warm, gentle voice that for most of us comes less frequently, sometimes takes some energy to invite to come and cajole to stay. We sometimes have to put out the red carpet for the friend and really encourage that voice to show up by asking ourselves what would we want to hear in our minds, or just trying to think of what's the kindest thing I could say right now. So we kind of need the friend to show up because that's the one who helps us be the most effective and our most awesome self. So what do you notice that you're saying to yourself most of the time? Who shows up the most or the least? Are there patterns to when the different voices show up? And is that the voice that you want to hear? So one strategy to encourage our positive, friendly voice to come is called mindful self-compassion. And this is a very powerful technique developed by Kristen Neff and Chris Germer. It has three components: mindfulness, a common humanity, and kindness. And I am going to invite you to participate in an exercise of mindful self-compassion with me right now. So I'm going to, if you can, try to get as comfortable in your chair or your walk or wherever you're listening to this or watching this. And just start to notice your breath. If you can take a few deep breaths. We're going to start with the mindfulness piece and just noticing our breath. You might choose to close your eyes or leave them open, whatever's most comfortable for you. As you notice your breath, see if you can deepen it just a bit. And notice your surroundings, notice your body, maybe soften your hands, soften your face. I'm going to invite you to give yourself permission to put aside what you were doing earlier today and put aside what you're planning to do later. Just be really here, noticing your breath coming into your lungs and going out. And I'm going to invite you to bring to mind a situation in your life that's difficult, that's stressful. You might remember something from the past where you felt overwhelmed, or you might have a situation right now that you find stressful. Just bring that to mind and see if you can feel a little bit of emotional discomfort, a little bit of challenge. I'm going to ask you to silently in your mind just recognize this is painful. This is suffering. And it might sound something like, oh, not again, or ow, this is awful. It might sound like, I don't want this. This really hurts. And in some way, just recognize that it is a moment of suffering that is unpleasant and painful. And then I'm going to invite you silently in your mind to say something to yourself that conveys that suffering is part of life and other people have experienced this as well. And that might sound like, yeah, anybody who had that happen to them would be upset. Or it might sound like, we all struggle, and I think other people have made the same mistake. Um, it might sound like I'm not alone. Other people have felt this. And if you'd like, just go ahead and put your hand over your heart. Feel the warmth of your hand, the gentle touch on your chest, and in your mind, express some kindness, the way that you would speak to a friend. And that might sound like, that really sucks. Oh, you're going to get through this. You're going to be okay. And you might think to yourself, what do I need to hear right now? And it may sound like nobody's perfect. You're a work in progress. It might even sound like, yes, we already know this about you. We know that you get overwhelmed. We know that you can be grumpy. And we already love you, already accept you. Your flaws have been visible the whole time, and it's okay. And so, as you think about what you might say to a dear friend who's experiencing a similar situation as you are, just let that kind of settle in. Allow that to be part of the language and the tone that you use with yourself. And as you bring your awareness back to the presentation, if we were in the same room, I would ask you if you were able to think of a difficult situation and if you were able to share some kindness and treat yourself the way that you would a friend. And most likely you would say, yes, I was able to think of a difficult situation, but it felt really weird to talk to myself the way that I talk to my friends. And that is normal. It takes some practice to talk to ourselves the way that we talk to our friends. But this comes in incredibly handy during stressful moments, and it's very powerful for moments where we could get lost in just the critic, the nag, and kind of beating ourselves up. So, because we have missteps throughout the day pretty often, it's good to have some strategies to pull up that kind voice in our mind. There are some strategies to invite kindness. One is mindful self-compassion. Another is just thinking how you would speak to a friend. Sometimes it's good to have some phrases ready. Like when you notice that you're struggling, you might just say, it's okay. You can get through this. You're doing what you can. Another strategy is to practice this with others. As you're going through interactions with other people, just choose words and tones that are kind and kind of practice thinking what would be helpful, what would be loving, what would be kind to say. Another strategy is just remembering the the reality that we are all works in progress, that we do improve with practice. We can give ourselves a break, we can give ourselves the benefit of the doubt. Sometimes we might want to picture ourselves as a baby or a young child, and just thinking of that young person innocently and rightfully wanting to be seen, understood, valued, and accepted. So I'm, of course, going to invite you to pause and reflect and think about, what are you saying to yourself as you go through the day? Would you use that language, that tone with a dear friend? And how can you invite your positive self-talk friend to visit, to stay? In our plan of action, take a minute to plan what you want to try to do the next time you notice an unkind voice in your head. What strategies to change the tone do you think would help for you? Which might work for you? And consider committing to a plan of action. I hope that this is helpful to you, and I look forward to connecting with you over the weeks to come.